So I'm back, and hopefully, you all had a chance to look at part one of the Fitted for This Season series. This video is part two, and it's okay if if you started fresh with this one with part two. This is where I'm kind of telling the origin story or the backstory of the book that I published in 2020 called Fitted for This Season, and that's right here. So it actually started, even though I published it in 2020, it started back in 2013. So around 2013, like I've said before, my background is in social work. So at that time, I was working as a program manager in Detroit, and I was managing two high school dropout recovery centers. It was one on the east side of Detroit and one on the west side of Detroit. So the company that I worked for at the time decided to close those schools. They no longer wanted to serve that population, unfortunately. So once that happened, I was actually laid off. And at that time, I was searching and I was searching for employment, and I just could not land a gig in my field. And hindsight is 2020. Now I look back at it. At the time, it was just, it was discouraging. Like, okay, how come I can't find a job in my field? What's going on? But now I know at that time that God was closing those doors on purpose. At least this is definitely what I believe. He was closing those doors to kind of force me to take another path. And at that time, that was when I started my personal training business, because I had been passionate about health and fitness since I got passionate probably about it when I was like 20, when I was in college. So it was always something that I was passionate about, but I had never endeavored to make any money behind it or make it a living for myself. But at that time, it's like, okay, no one's uh, offering me a job, so I'm going to create opportunity for myself. And so that's when I ended up starting the business Mighty Fit One. And so at that time, it was just designed to be a personal training business. And at that time, also, that's when I first started training with Coach Jules at Synergy Works. I had known him for years before then. I've known him since I was probably about 19 years old. But this was the first time that we started training in the gym together. He started coaching me. He's been my first coach, the only coach I've ever had. But so he was training me at that time. And at that time in my life, in 2013, it was one of those rough patches that you sometimes have in life, where the lifting and the working out, not only was it for my physical body, but I needed it for my emotional and my mental, and it was a spiritual piece to it as well. And that's kind of when that started for me, because it was like therapeutic to go in there and lift. And I would go every day, just go in there and lift weights almost every day. And um, so I started then, and so I started the business. And also at that time, I didn't have two nickels to rub together. so so being laid off for a while to do for you. So I ended up moving in with my parents, actually. And I was working, building the businesses, my personal training business. And then I also started volunteering at the church I attended at the time. I was working in the office, and I was doing whatever they needed me to do as far as office management. And then I was also working on a newsletter for them. So I would do a newsletter that we were working on. It has something about fire in the title. I can't remember the title. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I was spending my time just training and just volunteering at the church. And when I tell you I didn't have money, but I didn't have as much money as I've had in other times, but that was one of the most beautiful times of my life. Because I felt like everything that I was doing at that time was like completely all purpose. It was all purpose. It was all passion. And so every day I woke up with like, okay, what's the day gonna bring? What's the Lord want me to do? I was studying really heavily at that time. My mom, I don't know if she had completed it by then. I think she had. I don't remember. I have to ask her. But she has a bachelor. She's a minister, and she's a bachelor's in divinity, Christian theology, something of that sort. I have to ask her to clarify. But um, I would be studying the word at that time, and I would have the Bible, and then I would have three three to four additional books from her library, from her studies there with me, just to dive deeper into the word. And I started to write. So I would read the Bible, study the Bible, and then I would just start to write these things that I felt like really the Holy Spirit was bringing to me. I would just write them out. And I like to write. I like to journal. Every time that I read, study the word, I typically like to write things down. But this was a little different. Um, it was what I was writing, the things that were coming to me were more so, um, I can say now that they were like devotionals, but at the time I didn't really know, I was just, okay, these things are coming up in my spirit. Let me write them down. So I was writing those things down. And even at that time, I knew that, God uses everything. So if these things are coming to me and I'm writing these things down, it's for some purpose. I don't know what. I had no clue. So I just put them aside. I would write them and then put them aside, you know. So fast forward now. So that ends 2023. 13, writing those devotionals, which would later be the spiritual piece of Fit for the Season, would be the spiritual side of it. But let's fast forward to 2019. That time I had left Michigan. I moved out of Michigan, came back to Michigan, and I was a mother of a toddler. At that time, in, I was working as a case manager in community corrections, where we were serving those involved in the justice system that struggle with substance use, and I would facilitate some cognitive behavioral groups with them. And I was also still in the health and fitness, but I wasn't training at that time. I was kind of like, it was like that adjustment to motherhood and full-time working and things like that. So I wasn't really training at that time, or training anyone. I was training myself, but I wasn't training anyone at that time. Now, this is the part that gets a little fuzzy for my memory. The devotions that I wrote in 2013, around 2019, they came back to my memory, or they came back to my attention. Don't ask me how. I don't really know. I don't recall how. Just call it a God thing. But they came back into my remembrance, and I went through them. And at that time, um, something that came into my spirit was like, oh, these look like fitness devotionals. I think that was the first time that what I had read differently to me. They kind of read, I was like, oh, these kind of are like devotionals. And I thought, well, that would be cool if I, I didn't think about putting it out as a book, but I thought about, okay, at that time you could do social media, you could do blogging. I'd done some blogging before. And I thought, well, I'll take these devotionals, and I'll make more, and I'll put together maybe some type of fitness devotion. But then I thought, well, that seems kind of incomplete. So to just have the spiritual piece, and it's designed as kind of a devotional to assist you with your health and wellness, but then there's nothing for you to do. And we know that, faith without works is dead. So I'm like, you supply someone with spiritual inspiration, but you need to give them the tools to be able to do something as well. You don't want to leave them without the resources after you inspire them, or they get inspired by the word of the Lord. So I said, okay, well, there has to be like a fitness and a nutrition piece to it as well. So I began to write those things. And it just so happens, with my work at the time facilitating those cognitive behavioral groups, I said, well, I can't give them the spiritual piece, give them the tools for fitness and nutrition, and then leave them without the tools that they need to kind of shift their mindset, to change some of their behaviors, to renew their thoughts, to change their thoughts. The thoughts, change your behavior. So I'm like, they have to have that piece as well. So that's when I began to write that piece. So this is all kind of coming together in 2019. So that's when the mind, body, and spirit pieces started to come together, and I started to write those. Now, at the same time, I have a friend who, one of my besties, who had already written and self published a book of her own, and it was a fiction book. And at that time, she was also working on a book that it was a nonfiction book. It was a book that helped individuals that were in the corporate world that wanted to transition to entrepreneurship. And so she kind of served as essentially as a mentor for me during the whole writing and self-publishing process. And I'll put her information or a link to connect with her in the description. But it just was funny that she had already written that fictional book, and then she was working on another book, another project that was about someone. Now, I wasn't in the corporate world, but I was in the nonprofit world, but you get the point. Someone going from a 9 to 5 and transitioning into entrepreneurship. And that was something that I was considering at that time, a slow transition. Now that I had a child, I didn't want to go back to the how I went straight to my parents' house before I wasn't a mother. So this time I said, okay, I need a little smoother transition into entrepreneurship if that's what I'm going to do. And so we would have great conversations about that, and she would assist me with that. But, God gives you everything you need to do what he's asked or called you to do. So it's like every resource um, was made available to me at that time, and it came with ease. And I won't say that the work did not come with ease at all. I mean, you're writing, and you're thinking, and you're checking resources, and you're doing all the things. So that part is not necessarily easy at all. But as far as the resources that I needed, that just came easy. It was just all lined up for me. So I started using things like Upwork and Fiverr. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Fiverr for like copy editing and for finding someone to do the layout and to do the cover design for the book. And so some of the pictures, I have a couple of pictures that are in the book. One, of course, the cover photo, and then I had one in the back in the about me part. But my cover photos was done by an artist, a photographer, but I call him an artist because he's not just a photographer or videographer or any of that. Colleague Thomas, he's been okay, guys. So I was talking about colleague Thomas, who was the photographer that did my cover art. And sorry if I'm repeating, but my equipment wants to hate me today. But we're gonna get this video out anyway and see. I'm not gonna let that stop me. So again, colleague Thomas, great artist, photographer. I will put his information in the description so you can reach out to him. He does beautiful, amazing work, and he really is gifted and has been gifted since he was a kid. So the book actually released in 2020, and we all know what was happening around 2019, 2020, is that I released this book during the pandemic, during COVID. And so the idea of doing like pop-ups and doing book launches and things like that, it just didn't um it wasn't available. It wasn't an option. So I pretty much sold the book mostly online, word of mouth. I had so much love and support from family and friends and just different communities that I'm connected to, that supported, that got the word out, that said, hey, we were looking for this type of thing from you. We can't wait to see it. And so that really blessed me to know that, just to hear those things and to know people were looking for that and wanting to share it and finding value in it. So I didn't get the opportunity then to do the pop-ups and engage with the public and the community back then with the book, but I get the opportunity to do that now. So anytime I go speak and do a community event, I take the book with me, and this is great to. I'm grateful to be able to engage with people in person and talk one-on-one. And when I get to that one-on-one piece, it's just something different because people share with you. They share with you about their struggles and what they're trying to do, and you get a real chance to encourage someone. on a one-on-one basis, so I really enjoy that. The last thing I want to talk about is the title. So where did the title come from? Fitted for this season. Well, it was January 21st, actually, because I have the day because I recorded it. In 2019, I went to a church service with a friend of mine, and the pastor that happened to be speaking, he used to be an elder at the church I went to when I was a teenager. And back then, when I was 17, he gave a prophetic word to me at that time. And I won't go into what that was, but he gave me a prophetic word at that time. Um, and then now, fast forward January 21st, 2019, I didn't even know he was going to be at the church speaking when I went with my friend. And at that time, he gave me another prophetic word. And funny, he didn't really remember me, but it's multiple years past, so I didn't expect him to. But he gave me another word at that time. And part of it is where the title came from. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I recorded this one so I wouldn't, forget it. I had it recorded and, made sure that I had it, line by line so that I could review it, pray over it and things like that. But part of it, and I'll have to read it because I don't have it committed to memory, but the part of it was a portion said, and this is the part that stood out. It said, I fitted you for this season. Yesterday is gone. I'm fitting you for this season. Um, then there were some other pieces, and I'm revealing to you who you are and fitting you for your next chapter of your life. It's the most promising chapter of your life. And um, yeah, that fitted for this season just that stood out to me. It spoke to my spirit, and that's where the title actually came from because that is the hope that I have for individuals that pick up the book, that actually do the work, that go through the work week to week, and hopefully you'll be going through the work week to week with me as I launch this YouTube series where we do that. I'm hoping that you realize that you're the next chapter of your life can be the most promising chapters of your life. Like it's not over with. You're still here. Um, so things can get better. You can work on changes with the Lord's help, of course. There's just so many things that you can get done. So, join me. It's going to be a fun time. It's going to be a fun time. We're going to get some work done, but it's going to be a fun and a good time. And yeah, let's get started.